This is the new H5 Studio from Zoom, the proper successor to the OG Zoom H5 released 11 years ago. This thing comes fully equipped with most of the H5 goodness that we're all used to. And I do mention most. That's an interesting story. Stay tuned for that. But let's see how this thing stacks up to its much older predecessor and even its lesser cousin from the Essential series, the H4e, starting with the build quality. So the build on this has gotten both worse as well as gotten better. While the original H5 had a much superior build, that rubberized exterior had a massive hand in taming handling noise, and it also turned it into a sticky mess over time. The H4e, however, is just completely underbuilt. Now, I can't say 100% that the plastic is different between the Essential series and the Studio series, but tapping on it does seem to support that argument. Now, everything on the Studio just seems to outclass everything in the Essential series. The whole build is just that much better. The buttons look ever so slightly different, though that can come down to slight manufacturing differences. And of course, the biggest difference between this Studio and every H series that came before it are those capsules. Zoom spared no expense here. These things are fantastic. We're going to take a listen to those differences coming up in just a bit. Now, the knobs on the Studio feel good, basically the same as the older units. And of course, that screen is a big old, beautiful, massive upgrade over both the original H5 and the H4 Essential here. Now, a few of those upgrades from that Essential series made it into the Studio series as well. Locking XLR ports, as well as the silent buttons, are just massive upgrades over the 11-year-old tech. And of course, the accessibility for the visually impaired is, again, just so important. But the biggest upgrades, those came under the hood. Okay, let's start with the big one. This thing comes with 32-bit float, which I think is becoming standard for a lot of new gear going into 2025. Not that it's necessary, I just don't think companies want to be considered behind in a technology, even if it isn't the reality, which, by the way, it's not. 24-bit is still just fine. Now, this thing also supports an upgrade in gain with 60 dB on the new unit, as well as a massive upgrade on the self-noise, or EIN. The old one was neg 120 dBu, give or take, and the new one is neg 127 dBu, basically the same as the F-Series preamps, which, by the way, does mean I can imagine the F-Series is going to be getting a facelift soon. Just saying. Now, the other big upgrade here is the sample rate of 192 kilohertz, which is absolutely massive. Now, the old H5 only supported up to 96, which back in 2014, that was awesome. But 192 sounds so much better with 2025 linked to it, doesn't it? So let's take a look at the recording differences between me just going into the recorder and as well as this is the recorder going out to the camera. This is just recording on board and pairing up with the camera later. And this is the sound of the audio going directly into the camera through the camera's preamps, even though I've kind of turned everything down and the preamp should be at a minimum on my Sony a7C II. This once again is the H5 being recorded on board. And this is the camera input. So let's take a look at the screens, and we're going to start with the Zoom H5 Studio, and then we're going to move over to the Zoom H4 Essential, and then we're going to move over to the H5. It's pretty obvious which one wins out of the three, right? Like, I think we can all agree that the H5 Studio has the best screen, but here's the kicker. What about when you put it up against the Tascam X6? Let's check that out. This is the Zoom H5 Studio screen, and this is the Tascam X6. Which one do you like? I'm going to save my opinions on this one because this one is very much a personal opinion and kind of a decision you're going to have to make for yourself. Now, I needed to mention this, but I don't think this is as much of a negative, though some people like Dylan may disagree. If you remember from the older units, they were feature-packed. It did things that most people didn't even know about, including actual audio editing. Now, if you go look at the Zoom H5 manual, it was massive, and there was just so much information in it. Well, it seems like that might be a thing of the past. Not that the new series is any worse off. I meant it when I said most people didn't know about most of the older features because most people didn't need or didn't use those features. Now, if you're one of the few that actually utilized the whole of the H5, I'm sorry to say, things got a bit simpler. However, I'm kind of curious, which niche features from the old lineup did you use? Let me know down below. Don't fret though, it's not as simple as the Essential series. But despite all those changes, the new Zoom H5 Studio is still a powerful beast. All right, so let's get into it, the pros and cons. And we're going to start with the pros. The screen is just a massive upgrade. Thank you, Zoom. This was lacking, and Tascam was kind of stuffing you in your own locker with their screens. It's just a screen, but if anything, it shouldn't make you look dated. They're a nice step up. Next is gain knobs. I can't express how necessary the simple things in life are. The headphone preamps are a step up as well, though I can't imagine a lot of people using 250 ohm headphones with a handy recorder. And of course, I would be wrong not to mention the NEG 127 EIN. That spec alone makes these stand up to some of the best interfaces on the market. NEG 127 is basically the bare minimum, and you know what? That's awesome. Thank you. As for the cons, don't worry, the list is shorter this time. One thing I just do not like is how the waveforms are represented. When you're recording with NEG 18 peaks, the recorder looks like the files are recording quite high. Now, this might seem like a bit of a weak complaint, but I need accurate representation of what's being recorded. That's how I make my mixing decisions with gain sometimes. If I'm live and I just see that, I'm going to think my gain is fine when in fact I'm barely breaking NEG 18. Also, I would absolutely love to be able to just isolate specific tracks in view. So if I'm not recording through one or two, I can just see the XY tracks. This would give just that little bit of extra control there. I do love the multiple displays option, but that one little detail would just make it better. I'm not sure if any of that is doable with the firmware update, but it'd be great. So then what does all this mean? I think this is pretty much the final nail for the old H5 series. I can't imagine it having much left to offer, especially from a raw specs perspective. And yeah, the handling noise on the new one is a bit frustrating, but specifically the noise levels was the one thing holding this lineup back, especially if you were layering up multiple sources from the same unit. Not to mention, bringing the accessibility for the visually impaired for an up-to-date unit is massive. This is the true replacement for the 11-year-old H5 from Zoom. And not a moment too soon. This puts Zoom right back on the top and lets them reclaim their crown that was somewhat stolen by Tascam a few years back. But even then, even with Zoom down and out, and only releasing the Essential series last year, no one stepped up. And even when Tascam did a few years back with their X series, even those were pared down to just mostly basic recorders. The whole field has been wide open to be overtaken, and I'm kind of surprised it didn't happen. All that said though, this thing is awesome, and I'm looking forward to see how the rest of this Studio series pans out. And I'm going to mention again, if you've been looking at the field recorders or F-Series from Zoom, keep an eye out on what they have planned there as well. I can't imagine the H and F-Series are going to have the same preamps for long. Just saying. By the way, if there's something you want from this unit in the future, maybe how to do certain things, let me know down below. I'm thinking of doing some tutorials with the H5 Studio. Hit me up. Cheers, guys, and thanks for watching.